Listen to me, life. Life has a way of testing you, pushing you, breaking you down when you least expect it. And you know what? That pain you feel, that emptiness, that silence, it don't go unnoticed. It don't just disappear. The more you ignore him, the more he feels it. That man you see, standing alone, sitting in the back, holding it all in, he ain't just quiet. He ain't just distant. He's screaming inside, but nobody hears him. You walk past, you look the other way, you pretend he don't exist. But let me tell you something. He feels it every single time. See, we live in a world where people are so quick to judge, so quick to label, but they don't ask. They don't listen. They don't see the war going on behind a man's eyes. And that's dangerous. Because the more you push him aside, the more you make him feel invisible, the deeper he sinks until one day he's gone. And then everybody want to say, I wish I had known, I wish I had reached out, I wish I had said something, but it's too late. It's too late when the pain has already swallowed him whole. So I'm telling you, right here, right now, open your eyes, open your heart, pay attention to the people around you. That man you ignore today, he might not be here tomorrow. And you're going to wish you had done something. Pain is not something you can just wish away. It's not something that fades simply because you choose not to acknowledge it. No, pain lingers. It festers. It grows in the dark spaces of the mind, feeding off silence, off neglect, off the weight of unspoken words. You see, we have this illusion that if we don't look at something, if we don't talk about it, it somehow ceases to exist. But that's not how pain works. It doesn't need attention to survive. It thrives in the very absence of it. When a man is hurting and the world turns its back, that pain doesn't dissolve. It multiplies. Think about it. When you break a bone, does ignoring it make it heal? No. It needs care, attention, a cast, maybe even surgery. The same is true for emotional pain. A man who carries burdens too heavy to bear on his own doesn't suddenly feel lighter just because nobody asks him how he's doing. In fact, the more he's ignored, the heavier that weight becomes. And yet, people walk by him every single day, pretending not to see the signs, not to notice the way his shoulders slump, the way his eyes lack light. They don't ask because they're afraid of the answer. They don't reach out because they tell themselves it's not their problem. But here's the truth. Pain demands to be felt. Whether you acknowledge it or not, it doesn't just disappear into thin air. It lingers in the silence of an empty room. It echoes in the late-night thoughts that refuse to let go. It burns in the chest, in the throat, in the eyes of a man too tired to keep pretending he's fine. The world might look away, but he still feels every bit of it. Every rejection, every dismissal. Every moment someone had the chance to say something, to do something, but chose to keep walking. And let me tell you something else. Ignoring pain doesn't just affect the person feeling it. No, it spreads. It leaves a mark on the people around him, on the ones who will one day wonder why they didn't do more. You see, when you ignore a man's suffering, you're not just allowing his pain to grow, you're allowing it to become a burden that others will have to carry when it's too late. You ever notice how, when tragedy strikes, people start scrambling for answers? I had no idea. He never said anything. I wish I had. But the signs were always there. The pain was always there. It was just ignored. So many people suffer in silence because they feel like no one cares enough to listen. And when nobody listens, they start to believe their pain is invisible. They start to believe they are invisible. That is the most dangerous thing of all. When a man begins to think his existence doesn't matter, that his struggles are meaningless, and what do people do? They dismiss it. They say, he's just quiet, he keeps to himself. That's just the way he is. But what if that's not the way he is? What if that's just the way he's been forced to be? Because every time he tried to speak, nobody listened. Every time he tried to show his pain, the world turned away. Pain is not something you can bury. You can try, you can push it down, you can lock it away, but it will find its way to the surface. It always does. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually it will break through, and when it does, it won't come as a whisper. It will come as a storm. And the people who ignored it, the ones who chose silence over action, they will be the ones left standing in the wreckage, wondering how they didn't see it coming. So understand this. Just because you turn your back on someone's pain doesn't mean it ceases to exist. It is still there, growing, expanding, consuming. And the longer it goes unacknowledged, the harder it becomes to heal. The more you ignore him, the more he feels it. And by the time you finally notice, by the time you finally care, it just might be too late. Silence is deceiving. It fools people into believing that everything is fine, when in reality, it is often the loudest cry for help. A man who is silent is not necessarily at peace. He may be at war within himself, fighting battles that no one else can see. But the world doesn't stop for silent struggles. People assume that if a man doesn't speak about his pain, then maybe it's not real, maybe it's not serious. But that's where the danger lies. The most broken people are often the quietest, not because they have nothing to say, but because they have learned that nobody listens. Think about it. When was the last time someone asked, "How are you?" and truly wanted the real answer, not just the polite, automatic response, not just, "I'm good," but the truth? Most people don't want the truth. They don't want to hear about the weight on a man's shoulders, about the nights spent staring at the ceiling, about the thoughts that don't go away. They want easy, simple, comfortable conversations, and so, over time, that man stops talking. He learns to keep his struggles to himself, not because he doesn't feel them, not because they don't matter, but because he's convinced himself that nobody cares enough to hear them. You see, silence is not the absence of pain, it is the result of it. A man who has been ignored too many times, dismissed too often, or met with empty words instead of understanding, will eventually retreat into himself. He will carry his pain alone, not because he wants to, but because he feels like he has no other choice. The world doesn't make space for men to break down. Society tells them to be strong, to be tough, to keep moving forward no matter what. So they do. They swallow their pain, they lock it away, and the world mistakes that silence for strength. But let me tell you something. There is nothing safe about a man who holds everything in, because pain doesn't just disappear when it's ignored. It builds, it hardens, it becomes something else. Anger, resentment, exhaustion, numbness. And when a man reaches that point, when he's been silent for so long that he doesn't even recognize himself anymore, that is when he is at his most vulnerable. That is when he is closest to the edge. And yet, the people around him still won't notice. They'll still say, "Oh, he's just quiet," or worse, "He'll get over it." But what if he doesn't? You ever seen someone break right in front of you, but you didn't realize it until it was too late? That's what silence does. It hides the storm raging inside. It makes suffering invisible until it can't be contained any longer. And when that moment comes, when the weight of everything becomes too much, people act surprised. They say, "I never knew he was struggling," but the signs were there all along, in the way he smiled less, in the way he avoided eye contact, in the way he stopped showing up, stopped reaching out, stopped caring about things he used to love. Silence doesn't mean a man is okay. It means he's been holding on for too long without anyone noticing. The world needs to understand this. Just because someone isn't talking about their pain doesn't mean they aren't feeling it. Sometimes, the ones who say the least are the ones who need the most. The ones who seem the strongest are the ones who are barely holding on. And if you wait for them to speak first, you might be waiting until it's too late. It's not about waiting for a cry for help. It's about recognizing that silence itself is that cry. So the next time you see someone withdrawing, The next time you notice the weight in a man's eyes, don't just assume he's fine because he's not saying otherwise. Pay attention. Ask. And when you ask, mean it. Because you never know when your words, your presence, your willingness to listen could be the thing that reminds him he's not alone. People are quick to judge. They take one look at a man, his face, his actions, his silence, and they think they have him all figured out. They label him without hesitation. He's antisocial. He's lazy. He doesn't care. But they don't stop to ask themselves what he's been through, what he's carrying, what kind of battles he's fighting behind closed doors. They assume, they criticize, they dismiss without ever knowing the full story. And that's a problem. You ever see a man who keeps to himself, who doesn't talk much, who avoids eye contact, and immediately think there's something off about him? Society has conditioned people to think that silence is unnatural, that solitude is a warning sign. But what if that man is silent because he's learned that nobody listens? What if he keeps to himself because the world has already shown him that it doesn't care? People are so quick to judge the way someone behaves, but they never ask why they behave that way. And in doing so, they ignore the deeper truth, the pain, the loss, the struggle that shaped that man into who he is today. You see, judgment is easy. It requires no effort, no understanding, no compassion. But to truly see someone, to recognize that their actions, good or bad, are the result of something deeper, that takes effort. And most people don't want to put in that effort. It's easier to point fingers than it is to extend a hand. It's easier to say he's just like that than it is to ask what happened to make him this way. And so people move on with their lives, never realizing that their judgment isn't just unfair, it's dangerous. Because when a man feels like the world has already made up its mind about him, he stops trying to change it. I think about this. How many times have you heard someone say he's just looking for attention when someone opens up about their pain, as if needing help is something to be ashamed of, as if struggling is a weakness? That's how society treats vulnerability. It mocks it, punishes it, and then wonders why people keep their pain to themselves. A man who is drowning doesn't need someone to stand on the shore and judge him for not swimming fast enough. He needs someone to throw him a rope. But too often, people choose to criticize rather than save. And then when tragedy strikes, when that man is gone, those same people sit around and ask, why didn't he say anything? Why didn't he ask for help? But the truth is he did. Maybe not in words, maybe not in ways that were obvious, but the signs were there. He just got tired of being misunderstood, tired of being dismissed, tired of a world that judged his struggles instead of trying to understand them. And so he chose silence, because silence at least couldn't be misinterpreted. The problem with judgment is that it assumes too much and understands too little. It looks at the surface and pretends to know the depths. It sees a man's anger but doesn't ask about his pain. It sees his mistakes but ignores his regrets. It sees his silence but never questions the weight of the thoughts that keep him quiet. And by the time people realize how wrong they were, by the time they understand what that man was going through, it's often too late. So before you judge someone, before you assume you know their story, ask yourself, have you really taken the time to see them, to understand them? Because everyone is fighting a battle you know nothing about. And the worst thing you can do is make that battle even harder with your judgment. Pain doesn't just exist in a person, it grows. It spreads. It deepens when left unattended. When someone is hurting and the world turns away, that pain doesn't stay the same. It intensifies. It becomes something else, something heavier, something more dangerous. The longer it goes ignored, the stronger it gets. And eventually it takes over. When a man is suffering and nobody notices, or worse, nobody cares, it pushes him further into a place where even he starts to believe there is no way out. You see, there's something cruel about being in pain and feeling invisible at the same time. It makes a person feel like they don't matter, like their suffering isn't important enough for anyone to acknowledge. And when that happens, when someone starts to believe that their pain is irrelevant, it begins to consume them from the inside. They stop speaking because nobody listens. They stop reaching out because nobody reaches back. They stop hoping because the world has shown them, time and time again, that hope is for people who are seen, who are heard. And they are neither. Ignoring someone's pain doesn't make it disappear. It doesn't lighten their load or ease their suffering. If anything, it confirms their worst fear that they are alone in it, that nobody cares enough to notice, that they could be drowning right in front of everyone, and not a single person would throw them a lifeline. Imagine what that does to a person. Imagine what it feels like to be surrounded by people yet feel completely unseen. That kind of loneliness doesn't just hurt, it destroys. And the thing is, most people don't even realize when they're pushing someone deeper into that darkness. They think if he needed help, he'd ask for it. But that's not how it works. A man who has been ignored for long enough won't ask for help. He will assume it's not an option. He will convince himself that his pain is a burden, that his struggles are his alone to carry. And so he suffers in silence, while the people around him continue on as if nothing is wrong. But then one day that silence becomes permanent. One day that pain that was ignored for so long reaches its breaking point. And suddenly everyone is shocked. Suddenly people start asking, how did this happen? Why didn't he say anything? But he did. He did in 1,000 different ways. In the way his smile faded. In the way his presence became smaller. In the way he stopped laughing, stopped engaging, stopped trying. The signs were there. They were always there. But nobody paid attention. The truth is, people don't just give up overnight. They don't wake up one day and decide they've had enough. No, it happens gradually. It happens in the moments when they needed someone, and no one was there. In the days when they were screaming inside, but nobody heard them. In the times when they felt like breaking, but they had to hold it all together because nobody cared enough to ask how they were doing. That's how people lose themselves, not in a single moment, but in a series of moments where they were ignored when they needed help the most. So understand this: when you ignore someone's pain, you are not just a bystander. You are part of the reason they are sinking. You are part of the reason they feel alone. And by the time you realize what's happening, by the time you finally care, you might be too late. Because the more you ignore him, the more he feels it. And the deeper he falls into a darkness that no one tried to pull him out of. Regret is a heavy thing. It weighs on the soul in a way that nothing else does. And the cruelest part, it always comes too late. When a man is suffering in silence, when he is carrying a burden too heavy for him to bear alone, the world often doesn't notice. People get too caught up in their own lives, their own problems, their own routines. They assume he's fine. They assume he'll figure it out. They assume he's strong enough to handle it on his own. Until one day he's gone. And suddenly everyone wishes they had done things differently. That's when the questions start. How did I not see it? Why didn't I check in on him more? What if I had just reached out that one time? But by then those questions have no answers, only silence. Only empty space where a person used to be. The reality is, people don't think about what they should have done until they no longer have the chance to do it. They don't realize the weight of their inaction until it's staring them in the face, cold and irreversible. And by then, the only thing left to do is grieve. It's a terrible thing, knowing that you could have made a difference but didn't. Knowing that a simple text, a phone call, a conversation, anything could have changed the course of someone's life, but you never took the time. Because you were busy. Because you assumed they were fine. Because you figured someone else would reach out. But nobody did. And now you can't go back. You can't take back the days, the weeks, the years of silence. You can't undo the moments when you walked past, when you ignored the signs, when you told yourself it wasn't your problem. And what hurts even more, the fact that the world only starts paying attention when it's too late. When someone is gone, people start posting, sharing memories, saying things like, I wish I had known. I wish I had done more. But where was that energy when they were still here? Where was that love, that concern, that urgency? Why does it take a tragedy for people to realize how much someone mattered? Why do people only give flowers to the dead when they could have given kindness to the living? The truth is, people take others for granted. They assume there will always be more time, more chances, more opportunities to say, I'm here for you. But time is not guaranteed. You don't always get another chance. And the worst feeling in the world? is standing at a funeral, looking at a picture of someone who used to be full of life, and realizing that you could have been there for them, but you weren't, that you could have been the person who reminded them they weren't alone, but you let them slip away instead. You see, regret is not just about what you did, it's about what you didn't do. The conversations you never had, the moments you missed, the times you told yourself, I'll reach out tomorrow, but tomorrow never came. And when that moment of realization hits, when you finally understand that you can't fix what's already been broken, the weight of it is unbearable. Because you don't just mourn the person, you mourn the chances you lost, the words you never said, the love you never gave. So before you find yourself living with that kind of regret, ask yourself, are you paying attention? Are you showing up for the people in your life before it's too late? Because the truth is, once they're gone, all the apologies, all the guilt, all the I should have, and I wish I had won't bring them back. And by then, all you'll have left is the unbearable weight of knowing you waited too long. From the time they are young, men are taught one thing above all else: be strong, be tough, don't cry, don't complain. No matter what happens, keep moving forward. Society drills it into them, this idea that showing emotion is weakness, that talking about pain makes them less of a man. So they learn early on to bottle things up, to keep their struggles to themselves. They learn that when they hurt, the world doesn't want to hear about it. The world expects them to handle it alone. And so they do, or at least they try. But here's the truth: strength is not the absence of pain. Strength is not silence. Yet that's what men have been conditioned to believe. They grow up watching their fathers, their uncles, their grandfathers bury their emotions deep, never showing weakness, never asking for help. And they follow that same path, thinking it's the only way. When they feel pain, they swallow it. When they struggle, they keep it hidden. When they want to cry, they force themselves to smile instead, because that's what they were taught to do. And what happens? That pain doesn't go away. It builds. It festers. It turns into something heavier, something that weighs them down more and more every day. But they don't speak on it. They don't reach out. Because they've been told their whole lives that nobody wants to hear about a man's pain. They've been told to man up, to push through, to deal with it on their own. So even when they're breaking inside, they suffer in silence. Even when they need help the most, they convince themselves they don't deserve it. The world will look at a man who is struggling and say, why didn't he say anything? But when has the world ever truly listened? When has society ever made space for men to express their pain without judgment, without ridicule? The truth is, men don't speak because they know what happens when they do. They know how quickly they'll be dismissed, how often they'll hear, you're overreacting, you'll be fine. Toughen up. So instead, they keep it inside. They let it eat away at them in silence. And then one day that silence becomes unbearable. One day the weight of everything they've held in for years, maybe even decades, becomes too much to carry. And by then, it's too late. That's when people stop paying attention. That's when people start saying, I never knew he was struggling. But the truth is, he was struggling. He just didn't feel like he had permission to say so. He didn't feel like anyone would care if he did. Men are suffering every single day under the weight of expectations that tell them they must never show weakness. They are battling demons nobody sees because they've been taught not to show them. And what's worse, when they finally do break, when they finally lose the fight against their own pain, the world acts shocked. The world wonders why they didn't speak up. But why would they? When all their lives, they've been taught that their pain doesn't matter. So if we want to change this, if we want to stop losing good men to silence, then we have to start showing them that it's okay to hurt, that it's okay to talk, that asking for help is not weakness, it's strength. Because the strongest thing a man can do is not suffer in silence, but speak up and allow himself to be seen. And until the world understands that, men will continue to carry their pain alone until it's too late. People are quick to judge a man by his worst moment. They see him explode in anger, lash out in frustration, break down in tears, and immediately label him. He's unstable. He's dangerous. He's weak. But what they don't see, what they refuse to see, is everything that led up to that moment. They don't see the sleepless nights, the silent battles, the weight he's been carrying for years. They don't see the countless times he swallowed his pain, pushed it down, told himself to keep going, even when everything in him was breaking. No, they only see the final moment, the moment he couldn't hold it in anymore. People act like a man's outburst comes out of nowhere, like it just happened suddenly without warning. But that's not how it works. That anger, that frustration, that breakdown, it's been building for a long time. It's the result of years of being ignored, dismissed, told to toughen up. It's the weight of every time he needed someone but had no one. Every time he wanted to speak, but felt like nobody would listen. Every time he felt alone in a crowded room, screaming on the inside, but showing a brave face, because that's what the world expected of him. And then, one day, it all spills out. Maybe it's in an argument. Maybe it's in a moment of complete exhaustion. Maybe it's after one more setback, one more disappointment, one more reminder that he's carrying all of this alone. And suddenly he's not quiet anymore. Suddenly he's raising his voice, slamming his fist on the table, walking out of the room before he says something he can't take back. And what do people do? They focus on that one moment. They ignore everything that led up to it and act like this outburst, this explosion is who he really is. Nobody stops to ask what happened before this. Nobody wonders how long he's been holding it all in. Nobody thinks about how many times he stayed silent when he wanted to scream. How many times he forced a smile when he was on the verge of breaking. How many times he let things slide, let people walk over him, let life push him down because he was trying to be the bigger person. No, people don't think about any of that. They just see the moment he finally snapped, and that's all they remember. And what's worse, after the outburst, after he finally lets out everything he's been holding inside, he's the one who ends up feeling guilty. He's the one who walks away thinking, I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have lost my temper. I should have just kept it in. Because that's what the world has taught him to suppress, to contain, to pretend he's fine, even when he's not. And so, the cycle continues. He bottles it up again. He tries to move on, until the next time when the pressure builds too high, and the same thing happens all over again. The world needs to stop punishing men for reaching their breaking point. Stop waiting until they explode to finally notice them. Start paying attention before it gets to that point. Because no man wants to lose control like that. No man enjoys being overwhelmed by his own emotions. But when you push someone into a corner, when you make them feel like they have no outlet, no space to express what they're going through, eventually they will break. And instead of asking, why did he snap? You should be asking, why did he have to carry all of this alone in the first place? So next time you see a man lose his temper, break down, reach his limit, don't just judge him for that moment. I don't just label him for his reaction. Think about the pain that came before it. I think about the years of silence, the years of pretending, the years of struggling with no one to turn to. Because if the world paid more attention to the pain before the outburst, maybe men wouldn't have to reach their breaking point just to be noticed. A man can only be ignored for so long before he starts to believe that maybe, just maybe, no one cares. At first, he might brush it off, tell himself people are just busy, that they'll check in eventually. He convinces himself that his struggles aren't as important as everyone else's. But then days turn into weeks, weeks into months, and the silence remains. Nobody asks how he's doing. Nobody notices the weight he's carrying. And slowly, that doubt creeps in. Maybe I don't matter as much as I thought I did. That thought alone is dangerous. But what's even worse, he starts to believe it. When a man reaches that point, when he genuinely starts to believe that no one cares, it changes something in him. He stops reaching out. He stops hoping for support. He stops expecting anyone to check in, to notice, to even acknowledge what he's going through. And when that happens, his entire outlook on life shifts. The world no longer feels like a place filled with possibilities. It feels like a place where he is invisible, where his presence or absence wouldn't make a difference. And that is a dark and lonely place to be. The problem is, once he falls into that mindset, it's incredibly hard to pull him out of it. It's not just about being sad or feeling down for a day. It's about losing faith in people, in relationships, in the idea that he is valued. And the longer that belief settles in, the more dangerous it becomes. Because when a man feels like no one cares, he starts to question everything. Why keep trying? Why keep fighting? What's the point? And when a man starts asking those questions, he's walking a thin line between surviving and giving up. People don't realize how powerful it is to simply acknowledge someone to remind them that they matter. A simple, "Hey, I've been thinking about you," or "How are you really doing?" can make all the difference in the world. Because when a man is battling his own mind, when he's fighting against the thought that no one cares, even the smallest gesture can bring him back. But the problem is people assume he's fine. They assume he doesn't need us. They assume he's strong enough to handle things on his own. And that assumption, it can cost him everything. By the time people finally notice something is wrong, it's often too late. By the time they say, "I should have reached out. I wish I had checked in," he's already fallen too deep into that dark place. And the worst part, he won't even tell them. He won't say, "I needed you, and you weren't there." He won't make them feel guilty. Because by that point, he has already convinced himself that it wouldn't have made a difference anyway. He has already accepted in his own mind that he was never a priority. And once a man believes that, it's nearly impossible to change his mind. The world keeps telling men to be strong, to be independent, to never rely on anyone. But then, when they start to fade away, when they stop reaching out, stop engaging, stop being the person they used to be suddenly, people wonder what happened. What happened was, he stopped believing that anyone cared. He stopped believing that his existence made a difference. And when a man loses that belief, when he loses that small but crucial hope that someone, somewhere, truly values him, it can break him in ways no one will ever see until it's too late. So the question is, what will it take for people to stop assuming men are okay? What will it take for the world to start checking in before it's too late? Because the moment a man starts to believe that no one cares, he is already slipping away. And once he's gone, once he's given in to that belief, the regret, the guilt, the apologies won't matter. What matters is what could have been done before he reached that point. What matters is whether someone saw him before he disappeared in plain sight. So here we are. The truth laid out bare. Men are suffering, not because they are weak, not because they lack strength, but because they've been taught to fight battles in silence. And the world? The world only notices when it's too late. The world only asks, "Why didn't he say something?" after he's already gone. But the real question is, why didn't we listen? Why didn't we see him? Why didn't we make it safe for him to speak? If we want to change this, if we want to stop losing good men to silence, then we need to stop assuming they're okay. We need to stop waiting for them to break before we offer a hand. We need to stop punishing them for reaching their breaking point while ignoring everything that led them there. Because the reality is, by the time a man reaches out for help, he's probably already drowning. By the time he lets his pain show, he's probably already been suffering for years. It's time to pay attention. It's time to check in. Not just when tragedy strikes. Not just when it's convenient. But every day, in the little ways that remind a man that he is not invisible, that his pain matters, that he doesn't have to carry it all alone. A simple conversation, a text, a moment of genuine concern that could be the difference between life and death. That could be the reason he holds on for one more day. Because the more you ignore him, the more he feels it. The more the silence surrounds him, the more he starts to believe that maybe, just maybe, he was never meant to be heard in the first place. And once a man believes that, the world may never get another chance to prove him wrong. So don't wait until it's too late. Don't wait until the funeral to say the words he needed to hear while he was still here. Don't let another good man slip away into the shadows, convinced that no one would notice if he disappeared. See him. Hear him. Let him know that his voice matters. Because when we start doing that, when we start making space for men to be human, to be vulnerable, to be seen, then, and only then, will we stop losing them to silence.